All right, YouTube, it's time to talk about Chicago and gun crime because we've got new statistics coming out that are not friendly to people who are anti-gun, plainly put. And although you can't take everything in statistics at face value, you can at least say it's at least logical to assume that this is a fairly good story here. We're going to go to it. One of the link again in the description. What happened to Chicago's murder rate after Illinois upheld concealed carry and why it matters? It turns out that Illinois became the last state of all. It's an extreme gun grabber state. It's run by union corrupt cronyism and people like Obama. In last July, they enacted concealed carry because it was clear it wasn't constitutional for them to prevent it anyway. People have a right to carry weapons outside of their property. It's clear that they do. People who claim that they don't really understand what they're talking about. They probably haven't studied any American history at all, but whatever. It turns out that the first quarter murder rate in Chicago for this year was the lowest since 1958. That's quite a drop. The first 3 months of the year saw 6 fewer murders than the same time frame in 2013, a 9% drop, and 55 fewer murders than 2012. Quite substantial. There were 90 fewer shootings. See, even gun crime went down. This is something that they weren't expecting. There were 90 fewer shootings and 119 fewer shooting victims, drops of 26 and 29% respectively, according to the police statistics. Compared to the first quarter of 2012, there have been 222 fewer shootings and 292 fewer shooting victims. Overall, crime is down 25% from last year, and police said more than 1,300 illegal guns were recovered in the last 3 months. This goes beyond the general, logical, rational idea of coincidence, this particular drop. What I would wager is the cause of this is that gangs in Chicago and in the surrounding areas before realized that if they assaulted somebody on the sidewalk, they probably weren't carrying a gun. If they were, it was illegal for them to do so because they couldn't get a concealed carry permit. So either they were carrying it on a holster and they could see that they were armed, or they assumed this person at most has a knife. Well, I've already got a handgun if I'm a gangman, and I don't care if it's against the law to conceal it because I'm going to conceal it anyway. Because I'm street smart and I want that cash. So I go up to little old granny, and I know if I whip out a handgun on her, she's going to hand over her cash. Nobody's going to stop me because nobody in the crowd, potentially, has anything. And because of the way police stations work in large urban centers, usually you're waiting 20 to 30 minutes for them to respond to a call. Just earlier last year, Chicago decided that except in cases of severe life and limb, they're not even going to respond to the calls anymore because they're so understaffed, so under budget, they can no longer respond to most domestic calls for help from the police. The only option for individuals, and that's why you had that crime wave. Once they announced that, the criminals went on a free-for-all. Crime skyrocketed. But now they know that if they assault somebody on the street, there's a possibility that they are armed. That means that they're going to choose to go to areas that people probably aren't armed in. That means that they might go out of the city. That means that they might go to some area where there's less population density to commit their crimes, or they might not even bother. You see, there is a concept within psychology of reward versus risk. If I'm a criminal and I know that my prey most likely has no weapon on them at all, I'm going to go ahead and whip my gun out on them. They're not going to fight back. 9 times out of 10. They'll be too scared to do that. I can take their money. Nobody actually gets hurt because the understanding to them is all I want's their goods. The understanding to me is they're probably too scared to actually take a swing. I just stay back a few steps, have them throw the wall on the ground, and leave. But now they know that there's a much higher risk of them getting killed if they do something wrong. There will be people on the fringes of crime who will no longer be criminals simply because the risk has become too great. Or instead of trying to mug people or burglarize their homes, they'll go into some other type of, they'll sell drugs, Or they'll do something like that that's less risky. Yeah, they might still get locked up, but the average person who comes to you for drugs isn't going to suddenly whip out a gun and then reverse thug you and try to steal the drugs from you. Maybe a meth addict or something, or a crack addict. But certainly you're dealing a few bags of pot. It's a lot less risky than pulling a gun on someone who might pull out an even bigger gun and blow you away. So crime has dropped in Chicago. It's now down to where it was in the 1950s. And anybody with half a brain could tell you that this would happen, because it's happened in other states where it's been enacted. Crime in this country would go down severely if they did just a few little things. Stop the drug war, which dries up cartel money left and right, which means there's less, cartel activity, specifically in the South and also along the northern border as well. And in port cities, places like New York and Miami, that would dry up that. Number two, nationwide, stand your ground, castle doctrine, get those both in the works. Concealed carry shall issue. Anyone can get concealed carry unless they're a felon, in which case, you probably don't want them owning a gun. The open carry, same thing. There should be no licensing process at all for that, because you're not hiding it. And you're certainly not strapping an assault rifle to your back on a regular basis and walking to Walmart. A few people use absurdism and do that. The average person, it's a handgun. They've got it on a holster, they got it in their shirt or whatever. It's fine. Knives, same thing. People carry I carry a knife around on me. It's not like I go around looking for fights and try to stick people in the neck with my knife. It's stupid to do so. It's too risky, number one. It's illegal, number two. Number three, there's no reason to do it. I don't feel threatened. People here in Vermont, all the time, almost on a daily basis, you see someone who's got a pistol in their holster. And you know that the dozens of people you walk by on the street every day have guns concealed on them, and knives, and all sorts of other weapons. And it doesn't bother me in the least, because our crime rate is exceptionally low because people are carrying weapons. Gangs come up from New York City all the time into this area and sell drugs. As long as they remain respectable and they're not trying to mug people, nobody really, even the police, don't really care. It's sort of an unwritten little thing with the sort of crime syndicates that operate out of this area. They leave the general population alone and nobody's going to shoot them. But now these criminals in Chicago know if they try to roll little 85-year-old Granny Fanny, that Granny Fanny might pull out a .44 that's bigger than their dick and shoot them in the stomach. They're not going to bother trying to attack people anymore. Crime will become, and those that are dumb enough to do it eventually will probably meet up with somebody who has a better gun than they do and get killed, which means you're cleaning criminals off the streets far more effectively, by the way, than throwing them in jail so they get out and they immediately do the same thing all over again. And they're drug addicted usually when they leave jail, and their asshole is about 5 feet wide, so naturally they're angry at the world. What we need to do is reduce overall gun legislation in this country and let more people have more guns. This seems counterproductive to trying to reduce gun crime, but it actually works. It does. It seems counter to all logic that more guns in the hands of more people would actually reduce crime, but it does. Yes, you have a handful more accidental deaths, but you more than decrease that number many magnitudes over by preventing violent crime from happening in the first place. Because the violent criminal either says the risk is too high and leaves that type of crime, or they say fuck it and they keep doing it until they're killed, or they end up drug addicted because they become a drug pusher and then they just end up collapsing in an alleyway and getting dragged off to the hoosegow. It works. And now we see evidence. It's working in Chicago. It's too early to tell whether this is sort of permanent or if it's a temporary thing. It might be due to what someone suggested the time of year. I would say probably, though, in general, crime will drop in Chicago fairly quickly. If they should do this in Detroit as well. They should be giving out handguns to the residents of Detroit. Wait until you see how low the crime goes if they did that. Give everyone a little handgun and a couple of full clips and say, go to town. Next time someone tries to mug you, shoot them in the head. And enact castle doctrine and stand your ground. And these criminals will drop left and right. Pretty soon, the vast majority of people already who own guns or any other weapon are law-abiding. They don't go out and commit crimes with them. Most people in this country have more common sense than that, and they don't need to commit crime. They've already got their own money. you could clear up this issue fairly quickly by arming the populace. It would work. Again, it seems counter to all rational thought, but it's not. It actually works. We've seen it work. We've seen Britain. They ban all these handguns. Crime suddenly skyrockets. Yeah, gun crime goes down because there's no guns, but violent crime skyrockets. You watch. They undo the handgun ban, and violent crime will drop like a rock, just like it did here, because criminals will be too afraid to actually attack people. They'll stick to non-violent crime that's already more lucrative in many ways anyway. They'll stick to drug crime. And you can argue over whether that's good or not. You can say, well, now people are addicted to more weed. Who gives a fuck? They're still alive. They're not robbing banks. They're not breaking into your house and terrorizing your kids. They're not trying to abduct women on the street and rape them. They're selling drugs. I'd say that's a little bit of an improvement. Let them deal their drugs. I don't care. You shouldn't care either. Let them deal their crack to people who are already addicted. That's about all. Peace out.